Morning, Nathan.
Morning, Gary. How are you?
Doing well. We are the first ones here.
Yep, I just got out of a meeting with Rex, actually.
He's working hard on the ranch.
Oh, yeah, yeah, he is. I'm actually going to be there in 2 weeks, so that'll be fun.
Good.
We're going to Texas. So, yeah, that'll be good. I mentioned your idea to having strengths and archetypes listed on the app and stuff. So that's going to be, I'm going to add that to the list of things to do because that's a good idea.
Okay. So we got the thumbs up on that, huh?
Yep, yep. It's just bandwidth.
Well, I thought one of the things we would do today, I've really got only two things on the agenda in terms of we'll see where the conversation carries us. One is just to further the conversation about kryptonite, not so much the name of it, but the pushback that some of us are getting from clients that are used to the strengths positive language. And when you start talking about this other stuff, people get they cringe a little because it's like, oh, now we're talking about flaws and things that aren't all positive, and this language isn't all positive. And I've had two different groups I've brought through this. I've had the NSS group, and they were like fine with it. And then I've had Sarah, which I'm doing that pilot with Sarah, and half of their group is really concerned because they've sold to their leadership. This is all about positive language, and it's about what you do best and what you like most, and we don't really talk about other stuff. Of course,
how do you grow?
They're a West Coast company, so you just have to put it in context that they have offices in Portland and Oakland. They think differently there. I don't know if it's the air or the water. Or
I found that Californians are very sensitive, especially when they move to Texas.
Oh my God. That's like culture shock, major culture shock.
Oh yeah, because I lived in Texas for 3 or 4 years, so yeah, you be to California, and yep.
Yeah, I wonder what kind of drop off we're going to get today. I've noticed a couple of people saying they weren't sure they'd make it, and there's probably some people that tuned in just because it's Rex, and it's like, oh, Rex isn't there, I can skip this one,
Exactly. Yeah, I did promote it though. You saw me. I posted 2 or 3 times.
Oh no, you did great. No, it's super duper. I don't see anybody in the waiting room right now, and it is noon.
Oh, bummer.
That's all right. Hey, it'll be what it'll be.
Yeah.
We'll benefit from a smaller group if we have a smaller group. That's all,
Yeah, I do agree that a lot of people come to hang out with Rex and hear from him and stuff.
Yeah, for sure. They can just appreciate my guitar collection.
There you go. Yeah, I appreciate it.
So, do you know guitars? Or do you?
So my dad does. My dad has been a musician for
neat
30 years. Like he's been playing. More than that, because he played before he met my mom. So like 35 years he's been into music and known guitars and stuff. So he would lead worship at church and all those type of things and stuff like that. And so he taught me skills. So I actually played the drums, or I used to. I would have to practice and revisit that skill. I do have a left-handed guitar that has been sitting in the corner forever that I should pick up because I would love to learn, to play and stuff.
It's so easy to learn these days, and we didn't have the internet when I learned. I'm self-taught, so.
Oh, nice.
I had to figure everything out. I play by ear, but now you can anything you want to learn. There's just so many great people out there to give you lessons online or to figure out how to do the most basic things. It's just there's a plethora of really good stuff out there. If you want to learn, it's there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's super
You know.
easy.
Okay, some people in the waiting room. Pam Norton.
Sweet. Like, man.
Hi, Pam.
Hi there.
Morning, Pam.
Nice
Good morning,
hat.
guys. I'm excited. I feel like I'm in class today.
Oh gosh, don't feel like that. I want to feel like I'm in class today.
I'm a learner. It's in my top 5, Gary.
Oh, well, you're going to help us all then, because I want to pick everybody's brain, and
Great.
you guys can pick mine. We'll have hopefully more opportunities to do that today, especially if it turns out to be a little smaller group, which I expect it will be. We know that Rex is a draw, and when Rex isn't here, it's like, okay, I can skip this one. It's
Hey,
that
Daniel,
Gary guy. I've already heard enough of him.
How's it going, Daniel? This is your first one, right?
It is. I
Yeah.
just recently got invited well, you invited me. That's right.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. Yeah.
So, how did you meet Rex? Or hear about him, however?
Yeah. So we worked, I'm in education. We worked with him with some mind shift stuff. So I met him in Ontario.
Oh, okay.
I think that was the first time I met him, and then have had, brief interactions with him at different conferences and so on. So
Gotcha. Cool.
yeah.
Were you involved with the humanizing book at all, or any of the follow-up from that?
No, I was not in as far as writing anything, but I was involved in those conversations.
Well, yeah, that's involved for sure. I mean, that's how it all comes about. His process is, bringing people together that are subject matter experts and kind of looking at these big sticky problems from everybody's perspective, and then trying to figure out how to solve them.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. And
That's the mind shift experience. So you've drank the Kool-Aid.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the last time we also did the hero's journey, we talked about that as well.
Oh, great. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I see you're here in Virginia. I live in Great Falls. I'm calling right now from Great Falls, Virginia.
Oh, okay. I'm in Norfolk.
Okay.
I'm closer to you, Gary. I'm in Alexandria, Old Town area.
Cool. All right.
Oh my goodness.
We have
You
Northern and
Virginians.
Southern Virginia represented.
Yeah. When my first school, my wife worked in Alexandria. We lived across the water in Accokeek.
Oh, nice.
Oh, nice.
Beautiful area.
Yeah.
Old Town is amazing. I love it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I was actually excited to meet you, Daniel, to be quite honest, because you're one of the few masterminds. All your strengths are green. That's pretty awesome. That's cool.
I am a green all the way across the board. I did core clarity with Dan Behrens, I think about 10 years ago. And that's where he's like, oh, a fellow green.
Nice. That's awesome.
Yep. Yeah. And I'm still like really sort of working out that, how to, because I started working with Rex as a career counselor or career coach, because this is my last year at North Christian. And so trying to figure out next steps. Do I go to another school, or do I try my hand at consulting, or I'm going to do that anyway. I'm going to start a consulting business anyway, regardless of what I do. But yeah, so it's so he's helping me work through that, because one of the things, because he had mentioned the kryptonite thing in the email string, and that is something that I'm really starting to like read into and think about and process, is incorporating your shadow and how it makes you more of a whole person. And that's really interesting to me. It's something I hadn't considered before. So
hold that thought, because I'm going to come back to you on that, because we're going to talk today about kryptonite from a different point of view than we had the last couple of times. We're going to kind of continue that conversation. I'm going to share some experiences that I've had in rolling out this genius process to different clients, and some of the acceptances and pushbacks we've gotten so far.
Awesome.
And wanted to kind of pick everyone's brain about that experience and just share it. I see Eric. Eric, I don't know that we've met, so hi, how are you?
Pleasure to meet you. Sorry I was late. I was running from another critical meeting. But yes, I'm Eric Wages. I work for Google,
Great.
and I've been big on team development, which is why I'm here.
I'm glad you're on, Eric, because I really want to hear your feedback from the kryptonite and stuff, because that's the topic of today. So glad
Oh,
you made it.
wonderful.
Excellent.
Yep. And then Eric, this is Daniel. He just joined with Rex and stuff. So
Good to meet
Excellent.
you.
Pleasure.
Yes, sir.
And Pamela Norton.
yeah.
Pam, do you go by Pamela or by Pam?
I go by Pamela. Yep, I remember Eric. We were on a couple sessions
Great.
ago. Good to see you.
Awesome. All right, so I'm going to kick it off. We'll probably have some people jumping in whenever they come, and we'll just we'll let them in as they come. Okay, so here's where we left off. We were talking about kryptonite and a couple of things about it. Number one, the word itself. There are certain people from certain generations that don't really know what kryptonite is. They don't know Superman. Gen Zers, you might have to explain a little bit. So it's not intuitive. I don't know that that makes it hard, but it's just a recognition.
And cultures. And cultures as well. They mentioned like different.
Yes, people.
nations.
Yes, yeah. Internationally, people from different cultures, people from different parts of the world that are here. So it's kind of a foreign concept to some people. So even though it's kind of knee-jerk to us, we know what it is. We grew up. I mean, I grew up with Superman, and you know, it was on TV all the time, and all these different variations of comic books and whatnot. But so we have the language of kryptonite. So number one, not everyone's familiar with the concept, so we have to be, you know, aware of that. Number two, there's this concern about the tone of negativity because we're talking about kryptonite or something that, you know, is harmful to you. But that may not be what it is, but there's a concern about it. So we discussed, is there a better word? So we had some really nice suggestions. We've always talked about shadow side. Somebody said alter ego. We talk about blind spots, all of that. And I don't know that there's a better word. I don't know that we settled on anything. I think we're still taking ideas. I think we're on kryptonite. I don't know that that's really been altered, but I think there's an openness. Rex is certainly open to the concerns that A, not everybody knows what it is, and B, maybe a negative connotation. And I will tell you what I ran into. So let's skip the renaming it today and just talk about the idea of when we do a paragraph, talking about what's great about us. That's easy. It's positive language, and anyone whose organization or who personally have grown up with strengths, whether it was Strength Finders or called the Clifton Strengths, we talk about a positive language. And so it's really easy to talk about this assessment, review it with people, and go over the results, because we're talking about what's great about you, what you do best, what you like most, what you really love doing, and what makes you just feel great when you're doing it. So now we have, and that's easy. And a lot of our clients adopted this based on the fact that it's a really easy thing to roll out and talk about what's great about people. We all cringe at doing performance reviews and telling everyone how great they are, but all those conversations. So we get to this other paragraph about kryptonite, and I've had two different 180-degree responses from it. One client embraced it and said, because of the way we went about it, and we've already modeled it, we've done workshops, and we've already taken them through the process. The founder of the company kind of jumped in, and I think that's why it was super effective. He's like, I want you all to know about this stuff about me. I want to make sure I'm not stepping. He's a trailblazer. He's a serial entrepreneur, and he formed 6 different for-profit companies, and now he has a software school in Nashville, very successful. And as he likes to say, it's the first time he ever went nonprofit intentionally. So he's got a good sense of humor about himself, but he's a trailblazer. He's super driven. He's been very successful in growing this thing from nothing and becoming a real factor in their community. And he's like, I know I step on people. I know I can be too hard driving. I know that sometimes I go through a room like a hurricane and there's carnage when I'm on the other side. I feel good because I'm in my strengths. this is great. I'm having a good time. Then later, somebody might or might not tell me, well, I want to know if I'm doing that to you. So here's what it is I do when, I'm in my kryptonite zone or when I'm not really aware. And I think two things were important about that experience. One, the leadership team was well-versed in core clarity and in strengths. And two, the leader was very happy to share, and the leader started. So when you start with the leader saying something that makes them vulnerable, it generates and breeds trust. I mean, I don't know how many of you are familiar with Lencioni's pyramid. And the first level of trust is, vulnerable trust, saying something about yourself that is kind of hard, and it opens the door for it becoming a safe place. So I think he's always this particular guy was always the reason people clam up, because he's so strong and they're intimidated by him. And he's like, I know I do this. I don't want to do it. Let's come up with some rules of engagement that I'm giving you permission to say, you just dusted me, John, or whatever the words are, and you make them fun, you make them easy, you make it a sign, and you discuss, is it something you want me to do in the moment? Do you want me to talk to you afterwards? Are there certain circumstances where you want it handled differently? And so the whole concept of the leader starting, and for those of you who are consultants and have taken people through core clarity, the very first time you start sharing people's profiles, you usually start with the leaders and you don't put up the name and you let people guess who it is. And it's the leader. And then from there, it gets easier. So I think in their case, they kind of adopted that with this kryptonite, and he went first and kind of told everybody, this is okay. And here's why it's important, because this is a part of me, and it's a part of me I can't see. It's a blind spot. I need your help. So he's inviting you to help and giving you permission to say certain things in a certain way, in a certain platform, or in a certain setting. So that's client A. Client B has been their 200-person architectural firm on the West Coast. They're in Portland and Oakland. And they've had everybody in the organization do strengths. It's part of their DNA. They talk about it. And when I rolled this concept out, their director of HR, who I've been working with regularly for 3 years, I've coached many of their executives, done conflict resolution. They're really strong in strengths. She was really concerned. So I said, well, let's pull together a group of people who really like strengths and want to kind of delve in and see what they say. So we had an initial conversation about it. And I would say it's a group of 6 people. They were split, and half of them were very concerned because we've established this positive language here, and this doesn't feel right. It feels like we're doing something different. We're talking about our flaws. We're talking about, and I know some of the answers to this that I gave and that we give and that Rex would give, but before I even say what I would do there, I'm really curious, now that I've kind of laid this out, to get some feedback from whoever feels comfortable. Have you had a concern about this in terms of the language, and it's no longer just about what we're great at, but this other stuff too, the elephant in the room that we don't want to talk about kind of stuff. So I'm just going to throw it back to the group to see any thoughts on that, any experiences with it, any experiences with assessments that turned out to be too negative, or the conversations turned out to be counterproductive because they weren't positive.
I'd be happy to chime in there.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Rosie with Miller Brooks, and
Hey, Rosie.
I have a really positive outlook and hope for being brutally honest with each other and our team members. And I'm actually glad to hear that we're going to be talking about negatives as well. In fact, I studied psychology and sociology in college, and when I took the strengths finder the first time, I was very skeptical because it only focused on strengths. And then obviously I figured out shortly after that, once you start reading and really diving in on what they are, you can figure out where you need improvement and that type of thing. But I think it's refreshing. I think it's great to just get it out there personally.
Love it. Thank you.
And I'll just make a comment as well. I'm in the middle of a 6-month certification program. I don't know if you know IPAC and Bruce Schneider, but we're trained on catabolic, anabolic energy, and there's no judgment, right? We don't use positive, negatives. It's all levels of energy we go through from level 1, a victim, to level 7, one with the universe, right? So I think looking at it like what it is, and decharging the negative, positive language around it. It's the other side of the coin,
So I think what you might be saying is, we're looking at the coin. We have to look at the whole coin, which is, part of Dan's comment earlier about a holistic approach. If you're going to look at the left side of the coin, heads, you got to look at tails, because it's still a coin. I mean, I don't know if I'm making it too simple, but you're taking a holistic view. There you go.
problem solution,
Okay.
strengths, however you want to describe it, shadow, weakness, kryptonite. It's the other half. It is what it is.
Cool. Eric, any pushback on any of this so far at Google, or any overwhelming responses that are interesting to share?
Yeah, so a couple things come to mind. So I think there's a huge gradient in responses. So there's people. It's funny. There's one of our leaders who has gone all in on this strengths finder genius kind of concept, and because it actually really articulates him. But he loves that his kryptonite actually describes him, and it's now a giant run-on paragraph without any punctuation, because that's how his brain just is a stream of consciousness. However, he knows he gets ahead of himself and he leaves people in the dust, but he hasn't taken it the next step of to give this permission to stop him, or even come up with the language. What's the rule set for that engagement? So we're not quite there. I have heard the feedback. Gary, you kind of mentioned it from a cultural perspective. Is yes, there is an age element here, but there is also actually a geographical element. I'm working with all of our global teams, and so folks who are in London, what's Superman? It just wasn't part of their world. Interestingly enough, so we do have to find some better language there.
Okay.
But what's really interesting though at the base discussion of all of this is I have a situation coming up where one of our leaders, I don't look at this as it's not really a negative or a positive in terms of the kryptonite. It's just a reality, right? So it's knowing oneself. And I'm actually about to have a conversation with one of our very senior leaders that basically says, hey, look, organizationally, I need you to function a certain way for this upcoming engagement. And it is not how you function normally. It is not your strength. So I need to figure out how to give you all the things that make you feel comfortable to do these things. That's not how you function normally. So it becomes actually almost like a roadmap for me on how to help influence others, because they've gone through this exercise. But it requires this vulnerability to oneself kind of concept of I actually want to recognize that I have this blind spot. I mean, the words, some people trigger on the words. I think that what we probably need is just a vocabulary that allows some flexibility with the individual, and maybe there's a way to assess where they sit in terms of does every coin have two sides, or they look at from I'm a Dungeons and Dragons nerd and I have a four-sided die. Is there an alternative to these language trees? But it's the whole spectrum. It's very interesting.
Excellent. There's something you mentioned I want to follow up on, and that is, somebody's about to engage in an activity that's not in their strengths. It's not something they are comfortable doing. It's not something they do really well. So there's an energy component in that you should always advise somebody of. And I think Pamela was just talking about, that book was talking about, was that about energy? Right, it's a recurring theme. So we know when we're in our strengths, it gives us energy. There's a dopamine response, right? When we're not, it drains us. So knowing that you're going into a situation where you're not great at, or you're just uncomfortable, it's just not your strength, prepare somebody for the fact that it's going to be a draining experience. So you have to make sure you eat right, sleep right, have some people around you that can maybe help you with some of this, or develop a process to help you with things that you're not naturally good at. But following up on the energy release, there's a couple of things that send us into our kryptonite. One of them is stress, or just lack of energy in general from some of those things I just mentioned, like lack of sleep or eating or whatever. And the other is when we're in our strength zone, we can overuse our strength because we're getting that dopamine response. We're getting that response saying, hey, this is great. I'm having a good time. I'm happy. I am great at this. The world's an awesome place. And we, because we're not aware of it, are overusing it because it feels good to us. We don't know that it may not feel good to others. So again, blind spots means in real time, we can't see it. Your leader might be very aware of the fact that they dust people, but not necessarily in the moment. So one of the questions we deal with is how can we give somebody cues when something's happening in the moment to help them mitigate it, either right now in real time or later, so that the next time it happens, they can pick up some cue. So this, and I mention this because this is the other side of the coin, because the strength can have such an overwhelming impact on you, because you're so happy, because you're getting that dopamine response, you're unaware that you're overusing the strength, and you may be overusing it and causing others to be dormant. So you may have other strengths that are just not being played because you're overusing one or a couple. So there's an energy component here that drives us into our kryptonite because we're good at something, and we have a tendency from time to time to overuse it. So I think it's a really important point when we're talking to people about language, and I use this point with my client about the negativity of talking about the kryptonite. I'm like, well, sometimes we get there because of all the positive things we do and do well and like doing. And it drives us there, and we have to be told, you know, stop pouring, I've had enough. So, and you know, and I think most people are like, yeah, I don't want to do that to somebody. What can I do about that? So if you approach it this way, and I'm beginning to learn and feel pretty strongly that if it starts with leadership, and leadership demonstrate this, and they're the guinea pigs, I'll show you mine first. I'll be vulnerable. I'll bring you into my world of trust by saying you have permission to cut me off at the knees if I'm doing this because I don't want to do it to you, and I just don't know that I'm doing it. So please help me. So I think the order in which we do this is super important. Anyway, I'd like some feedback on that, because this is some of the feedback that I've gotten already from a couple of different groups. And what I've seen is when it starts with the leader and they invite everyone in and they give you a fun or easy way to say something, and you know you have permission, no one's talking about negativity. No one's talking about it. Not their emerging leaders, not the new people to the group, not the people that have been doing it a while. There's nothing. And then I have this other group that is so brought up on positive language and handling everyone and everything with kid gloves that I worry that they have some other cultural issues. And it's not just the conversation about kryptonite, to my fellow psychologists there in the group. Comments?
I think they might have performance issues at some point because they can't tell someone that they're doing a bad job. But that's an aside. The one thing I was thinking about is the language that we use. One thing we talk about in education is observational language, not interpretational. So when I'm seeing something, I'm not saying that you I don't know, you didn't show that you were competent when you did this or didn't do it. I say, I've noticed that this is happening. What is your take on that? And then the notice language removes, because all you're doing is you're sharing your perception. That's all I'm saying. I've noticed that this is happening. What do you think is causing that? And oftentimes they will be much more critical of themselves than I would be willing to be. And that's been very helpful.
that's a beautiful thing, because what's most important about that is it's non-judgmental. I'm
Right.
not making any judgments about you. I'm not saying it's good or bad. This is just what I've seen, or this is what I've noticed, or some other people have mentioned they've noticed this.
Right.
It's very neutral. It's non-judgmental.
Yeah, because if I start with interpretation, I will invariably interpret it as myself as the virtuous one and the other person as the non-virtuous one, right? And so if I start with interpretation, oh, I forget, Arbinger Group talks about being in the box, right? So if I start with interpretation, I start in the box, seeing that person as some sort of villain, and of course, I start that way, they're going to respond the same way, and then we're in this cycle where we're not even talking about observations or facts, we're talking about each other's interpretations.
And you have a pretty good chance of them feeling like you're misinterpreting their actions.
For
if you're
sure.
trying to, because you're just not going to hit it right, or you might be, but they may not be willing to hear that. So the observation is a great. I know we have some other people in the group today that are from education or may have some experience. Is that this is the first time I've heard that? Is that something that's known to people in education? This observational versus interpretive?
It depends on who you talk to, but if you're, I'm in independent private education, and so we're focused on inclusive education, and public schools, that's what they do. They're required to be inclusive. Where independent schools, it's a little bit more, you have to be more intentional about it, and so that's where I've gotten that. I'm not. I got that language from All Belong. They've been working with us for the past several years.
Well, I don't want to go off on a tangent, but I do want to follow up on some of the things you pointed out. And since we're showing books, you guys know this book. It's a Gallup book. It's The Manager. They say 80% of managers are not equipped to do the job we're asking them to do. And they're trying to do it based on what they know or who's trained them. And there's a huge difference between managing people as a referee and a judge, which is how most people come into management. That's how they were managed. Because again, 80% don't do it the way most of us would think it should be done. So that's what most of us have been exposed to. People who are playing referee and judge and jury. But what we're trying to all learn is how to become coaches and facilitators. And this whole observation, and I'm coming back to the whole kryptonite thing, because it's a part of that honest observation of everything somebody does, and not all of it's going to be positive. But if we can stick with it's based on your strengths, and we're still talking about positive language, and sometimes we overuse them, or we get that dopamine response, and we're all susceptible to this. I think we can keep the conversation positive. I think the root of it is still, it's about what's in your strengths. But, whether we get rid of the word kryptonite or not, I love the shadow side. That's always been something I've used since I've learned this. And I like it a lot in talking about blind spots, but I do think we have to remind people, we're not talking about your flaws. We're talking about what you do really well. It has a flip side, because sometimes under stress, we're a little broken in how we execute it, or maybe we're overusing it and we're just leaning on something too hard, which causes these other consequences. So I think how you frame it is everything, and who starts the process is really important. And I think at the end of the day, we're trying to train people to be less judgmental, less playing referee, and more facilitating conversations based on observations and facts and information like an assessment, which is very factual. So again, I'm comfortable that this, whatever we call it, kryptonite story, should not be seen as a negative, or we're following your flaws. We're following your strengths. We just know that we have bad days, and they don't look the same on that bad day. They look like this, and this is how this stuff might come out. But that's that's me, that's my take, and I'm trying to forward that with one group that's given me really good pushback. So I look forward to reporting back to you guys after we've been through, we have a second session. So we had our initial conversation. I gave everybody a couple weeks to think about this, percolate on it, and I know there's a lot of green in that group. There's a lot of people with deliberative and intellection, and I'm like, I'm going to give you guys some time to think about this. Then we're going to come back. So I'm really curious what they say to each other and how they come back at this, because I've given them some of the explanations I've given you, and I'm waiting for it to settle and see, once they've had their time to contemplate it, what it looks like.
I think one thing, I'm sorry, Pamela.
Oh, go, Daniel.
I think just one phrase that's so helpful is they're concerned about kindness, right? You don't talk about negative things because that's not kind. Clarity is kindness. It's unkind to allow someone to operate in a belief that is untrue. So if I'm not being clear, and I've experienced this here, because my predilection is to be kind and not say the hard things, right? But if I'm allowing someone to operate in this idea that they're doing a good job, and they're actually not, but I don't want to tell them because I don't want to be unkind, that is unkindness. And then they continue on, and they end up being told that eventually anyway, either by me or by parents or by students or somebody. And so clarity is kindness.
I love that. Pamela, you were about to chime in earlier.
Yeah, I was just going to piggyback on what you were stating about our strengths and how we can overextend into those strengths. The other side of that, I think that in pitching why this is valuable to our clients and prospects is how we're interpreted by others, because we don't live in a vacuum. So I'll give you an example. So my achiever is number 2 or 3. How that affects people on my team at times. I may not be overusing the achiever, but I may be in a group that's not their mode of op, they're wonders or what have you, and they're just like, wow, she's like too much. The fact that I'm aware of that gives me an understanding that these folks are over here on my team, here's who they are, and so now I'm going to mitigate a little bit more.
So you guys know the trait worksheet that we have that has the 8 positive bullet points and the 4 kryptonite bullet points. So one of the exercises that a lot of us have done, and we really highly recommend, is if you have a particular person you're trying to develop a relationship with, maybe there's been some conflict, or maybe it's just new and you're trying to learn about each other, you take that worksheet and you give it to each other, and you fill it out for them and they fill it out for you. And they ask you, gosh, Pamela, why did you pick this bullet point for achiever? And you explain it, and they go, okay, that makes sense because I had this one for you. And it's different. And here's how you impact me. This is how I see you and how you use your achiever. And then that creates a really nice, non-threatening conversation and a safe place. We're all trying to establish a safe place. And one of the things that just is resonating with me that Dan said is this clarity equals kindness. Not dealing with the elephant in the room helps nobody. And Dan, by the way, you're right about the company. And I know they have, when the very first thing you says is maybe they have a problem giving people hard information or giving people the negative information. I can tell you this, they don't fire anybody. They complain about them and they want to fire them. And I've talked to the CEO many times, and they just don't want to have those tough conversations about the elephants in the room. So you were right. Your instinct was right on. So I just want to give you credit for that observation. But where I was going with this is 2 people can look at that and, based on what Pamela was just saying, I sometimes think I come across this way, but somebody else might be taking me that way. And this exercise, looking at the trait worksheet and doing it with each other, filling it out for each other, and doing that in a group setting is great too. So I don't know if any of you have done this already, but in groups of 3 or 4, it's really effective. it's hard in larger groups because it takes a long time to get through a couple bullet points.
We did this with smaller teams several years ago, but it was, I'm going to call it the old school core clarity. It didn't have this layer,
Yeah.
but it was extremely helpful. And it, to your point, it created this safe area. And we now use that language a lot. But again, as I said, I'm really looking forward to it not just being what's great, but also where there could be some downfalls and we can help each other grow. I watched a TED Talk and this woman talked about caring deeply and challenging directly. And I think it's the same concept that Daniel's saying. I don't like the word challenge though. So I'm going to take what Daniel said and maybe it's care deeply and share freely or something that you can give your team permission to share freely so that there is a constant back and forth on it.
Yeah, and it's all in an effort to create a space where people feel comfortable talking about those things. And Rex has used this term false harmony before. So, we all try and think we have a safe place. And you talk to any leadership team or any management team about, how open are your people? You guys feel like when you come together as a group, you talk about the things you really need to talk about. Oh yeah, we've been through this, we've been through the wars and we do, but you realize that most of the time there's that false harmony and it's not truly a group that has that vulnerable trust and the ability to have really spirited debate about conflict or things we may not agree on and really dealing with the elephant in the room. And this kindness equals clarity, or clarity equals kindness, or care deeply, share freely, or what was the other one? Challenge freely. And
Yeah, it was
I
just
think
challenge.
your pushback to the word challenge is the same thing that I've experienced with this kryptonite. There's words that send these responses, and I think we have to be sensitive to that because if we can change the word and get rid of that knee-jerk response, we can get people to be a little more open. So
Yeah, it shouldn't be a debate or an argument. It should just be, like you said, a neutral sharing or observation.
One thing that Rex and I have talked about a little bit is language. Strengths give you a language to be able to talk. So like Rex and I, we had a session once. We went over my strengths a little bit because I was messing up in one or two spots, and we were talking about how these two strengths, I'm such forward thinking, I was way over at Z and we should have still been at C. And so, but I wasn't offended when he brought that up because it was learning about my strengths, learning about my strengths, not learning about what's wrong with me, learning about my strengths. And kryptonite falls under strengths. It's still in that same area. And so it was like, I was not offended when Rex was like, hey, this is what's happening. Use this part of you to counteract that. And I have been, my mistakes have gone to like 0. So just that one observation, it's like, totally changed how I work, and I don't miss the details anymore.
Excellent. Eric, I didn't notice when you put your hand up, but if you still want to chime in.
Yeah. So one thing I've been stewing on, right, is why the word matters to some people, and I think upon looking at some of my own kryptonite or whatever word we want to label this, and others, right, I think there's almost a justification for some folks who are like, for example, someone who might be like achiever activator who just blows people away with the level of chaos, right? And from talking to some of these folks, that their kryptonite's it's a result of getting things done, rather than a demotivator, of a blocker, right? Because I think looking at some of these two different types of like kryptonites, like some of mine is like, I don't even want to start doing work unless I can get people to buy off on the vision, because I know that they just won't see the outcome, or I'm trying to prevent people, right? So there's demotivators in here, and then, but they're for a large group of the flip side of the coin for a lot of folks who are very much the doers. It is a byproduct of the outcome of being successful, rather than preventing them from doing it in the first place. It's just a cost of doing business kind of thing. So I think I haven't quite thought through all of that yet, but there's definitely something there with this is the kryptonite or the shadow self or whatever to someone who might be demotivated, as their skills are demotivational on the from kryptonite. Kryptonite's probably the right word, but for someone who is an achiever, activator, doer, that's probably not the right word. It's the shadow self, or it's the two-face or whatever, right? I think that's why the identity matters in that context.
Good point. That's why, we're struggling with the word, because the word does matter. Words send an automatic response sometimes. And you want to make sure that whatever the word is, it's not a barrier to conversation and progress in building a safe environment. But at worst, it's neutral, and at best, it's something that generates curiosity and conversation. So that's why we keep coming back to the word. It's important. The word itself is important.
Does it have to be one word?
No, shadow self was one of the suggestions. Alter ego was another.
Or what if it were strength and then a descriptor for a different kind of strength, like strength and something strength?
I was thinking the same
Yeah.
thing. It's the results of your strengths.
To make sure that everyone knows it's still a strength, not a flaw,
Right.
unless you
And
let
how-
it be. Like,
I think we should,
I don't know.
everybody should ponder on that, because if there's a way to categorize this and have people realize right off the bat, it's an adjunct to, or result of, or a consequence of your strengths. It's not something else. And it's kind of hard to get that into a couple of words, but it's worth trying.
I sort of said this right at the beginning. I've been pondering the incorporation of the shadow, right? So the idea of kryptonite, I mean, the actual word is not that, it wasn't something that Superman had to incorporate to make himself a whole person, right? It was something that as Eric was talking about, that would demotivate, and I like what Eric was saying. It's almost as if there's different nuances to this, just as if, because kryptonite seems to be like one thing, but like the idea of incorporating the shadow is unique to each person, right? So each person, if you're out at night, you're next to a street lamp, you're going to have a different shadow than the person standing next to you, right? And it would be weird if you tried to incorporate that other person's shadow. It wouldn't feel right. It'd be like wearing someone else's shoes that they've been wearing for a long time. And if you ever done that, you slip somebody else's shoes on and you're like, oh,
That's
that
just
doesn't
gross.
seem right. Yeah, that's just the lumps are all in the wrong places, right? And so like the shadow is unique to each person, which like Peter Pan, right? So Peter Pan was constantly trying to incorporate his shadow, because the shadow would get away from him, right? And this idea of how do you characterize that with someone to help them understand that this is actually you. This isn't something that you suppress. And like what Jordan Peterson was saying, like if you suppress it, or no, it wasn't. It was what's his name? The original guy.
Lencioni?
No, way back. Anyway, the one that Peterson is an expert on.
Carl
Anyway.
Jung. Carl Jung.
Jung, thank you.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So is the idea of the Jungian idea, right? Is that we have to incorporate that to become a whole person. If we suppress it, it becomes the thing that destroys us. And so I'm just sort of rambling because I'm trying to like put pieces together in a succinct way, because when I think like we have to find one word to describe it, I don't know that that's possible. I think that you must have maybe you have a word bank, or maybe we have like knowing that I'm going into a culture, right? So I'm at this business in Portland, and I know that they're very sensitive to this. So I'm going to use very light, positive language about this is you. This is your shadow, unique to you. And we're trying to help you become that better person, right? Or that better employee or whatever. So I'm not going to use this language. I have a word bank for different cultural frameworks, maybe. I don't know. Thoughts?
No, that's really good stuff. Suppressing, I made a note, suppress a part of us, it can just, if we suppress a part of us, it can destroy us. I think that's a really good thought. That's a really good take, because this whole other side of the coin, if you don't deal with it,
Yeah.
it's gonna bite you, right? We all know the shadow side of our strengths bite us all the time, and we're not aware of it.
Yeah.
And we all need help with it. So, one last thing on kryptonite, and I've forgotten this until Rex reminded me, but kryptonite didn't really do anything negative. All it did was take away Superman's superpowers. It made him normal. So if you think about it, something that's undermining what makes you great is something you want to talk about. It's taking away your superpowers, or it's doing something with them that you didn't really intend. So I just want to put that out there. Does anyone else have anything on this topic? Because I have one other I'd like to get some input and thoughts on if we have time, but I didn't want to cut this short if anyone else wanted to be heard on it. Going once, going twice. Okay, so suggestions. I'm looking for some suggestions. A client came up with one that I floated, I guess, yesterday to Nathan, and they're going to incorporate it. And I was thinking there's probably some other thoughts that you guys have had. And is there something we can add to the app to make it easier to use, to get people to do these exercises or to aid in any of these conversations? And one of the things that the client asked for was, can we get a glossary of, all the strengths and all 8 bullet points and 4 bullet points for each one in one place? Can it be on the app? And, we send people documents and it can get laborious. There's so much stuff to share. But what we have is the trait worksheet, which will give you the bullet points for a person's top 5. But if you want to follow along with a group of people, you want something that has everything on it. So I'll look up achiever. Okay, here's achiever, and here's the 8 things, and here's the 4 kryptonite things. So Nathan is going to figure out a way to get that populated on the app, so you can just pull it down. You can say to the client, if you want to use that, just pull it down and it'll be over here in the menu. So my question to the group is, have you guys thought of a utility that you could use, or you'd really like to see, or there's something Nathan and the development team should think about in terms of any changes, clarifications, or additions to what the app is doing for us?
So
Go ahead, Eric.
I can give you a good one because Nathan and I just spoke about this yesterday. So again, this is my, here we go. This is my kryptonite, or whatever word we want to say, in full force, right? Like a lot of the feedback that I'm getting from folks is like, who can help me, right? So who can help me with a challenge I'm having? And those challenges are often because it might not be that person's natural self, right? Their kryptonite, whatever you want to say. And so from my perspective is how can I use these tools to connect person A with person B, the yin to their yang. So it's like, hey, if I'm a person who is so stuck in the details, I can't get my head out of the weeds, who is a good futuristic or strategic person that has these complementary skills? Again, I know all these skills still make the whole self, I know, but there's still pairings of true strengths and weaknesses that can help one another. My holy grail would be figuring out how to connect the dots this way, because I see these challenges every single day, and I don't truly know every single person enough to make these recommendations. So that's kind of like where I would love to see things happening, but that's so far down the road. I have to recognize that.
It's not really that far off from something we already have. We have a list of things we call strengths that collide, collisions. And they're collisions because they can be collisions because they are naturally different. Like the strategic person sees the world from 30,000 feet or 20,000 feet. The analytical sees it from ground level. They see things differently. You just use the word complementary. We talked about, and this is interesting because the word collisions kind of looks like conflict, but they're truly complementary because, if I'm the analytical one, say, I want to make sure I'm talking to this audience that I have a presentation to. I want to make sure I'm talking to everyone in a way that they can understand. So it'd be great if I had somebody strategic help me, because I tend to get lost in the weeds. So that's a complementary set of talents or a complementary talent that can help me. And I think if we don't look at it as collisions, but hey, there's a list of complementary talents that if you can talk to each other and compare notes in these things, you can understand that person much better, or somebody with that talent much better. And we've been calling them collisions. I have, all kinds of spreadsheets and lists, and one of them is talents that collide. But maybe we need to change that.
Actually, it's funny you bring that up, Eric, because I met with the developer literally right before I jumped on this call. But there's 4 big things that they're working on right now. You'll be happy to hear this one, Eric, is admin privileges. That is almost done, so that'll be good. And then also for you, Gary, way to toggle people's strengths. So like you add them to the team, you can turn their strengths off so they don't affect the overall archetype of the group. And their strengths will be in the top 5. So that's in the works. We are also adding a report where you can compare 2 people together. So what you just said, Eric, we can compare 2 people together. One thing that's really cool is we're going to change the archetypes. This is a little bit farther down the road, but what we're going to do is we're going to add a drop down for your archetype. So when you do, after you do your strengths, your archetype appears in the app. You're going to be able to, there'll be 4 sentences, and you'll be able to choose which sentence you relate to the most in your archetype. So it's going to take it a step further, rather than like, it says servant leader. Well, I'm like, I'm not a servant leader. Like, what does that even mean? Type of thing. It's going to give you language now to be able to relate to your archetype more, because I noticed that's something that people kind of skip over. And so it's going to bring more draw to the archetype.
That's good, because it's a summary. And most, some of us don't want the details. Just tell me the big picture stuff, and that summary gets you there.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to know more, the details there too.
Yep.
Any other things like that that could be helpful that you'd like to see these guys work on?
Is there a plan for a resource library on the site?
Yeah, that I mentioned that to Gary right when I jumped on. It's bandwidth. So we have all these things in different space, and so it's about bringing them together and having like a page on the app that says tools, and then there'll be like Rex will do an instructional video on how to do your paragraph, instructional video on what an archetype means, instructional video on X and X and X, and then also the PDFs for the strengths listed out, kryptonite, and the archetypes listed out. So you can, if you want to learn more, go here. So that is definitely one of the goals, and that's going to be happening at some point.
It's a big list. You guys have accomplished a lot very, very quickly. I think all of us are super impressed with how much has come to the table and how usable the app was right out of the box. I mean, we've had very few glitches. We've had some minor things, but I mean, it's been amazing. So of course we're going to keep asking for stuff because you've shown you can do it. So
Uh-oh.
one of my early bosses came to me with some stuff, and I was commissioned salesperson. I was so busy. He came to me with all this stuff to do and a project to work on. I'm like, I'm really busy. I'm happy to do it. And he says, look, I'm going to give you a little lesson in life. If you want to get something done, give it to a busy person. Find the busiest person on your team. That's who gets things done. That's who you give it to. And I'm like, great.
Nice.
So all you achievers out there, you're getting a lot of stuff thrown at you.
Hey, Nathan, is there any plans to do like a virtual background that would have the circle and the talents? Basically, like the way Core Clarity does, like I've got up.
We have not talked about that, but I'll make a note of it.
Because this is something that has just been incredibly helpful when you're doing virtual stuff. Even just in this group, it would have been fun to have seen the talent dynamics, and it would also give some insight as to why certain people are struggling with different words, and why other people, it's like it doesn't really matter. So
I like that. That's funny.
Good point. Yeah.
I know. I'm sure the force of nature was going, seriously, who cares about tonight or Jung? Like, who cares? Why are you
Move on, move on.
Get over
Hey,
it.
I will say this, I got a psychology degree from the University of Colorado. And when you start throwing those words out, I just say, if that's your clientele, go for it, but it's not mine. And
So Bert, am I correct that you are our guest host next week? And that, is it next week or the week after?
yeah, I think, is it next Thursday we're doing it? Or
think
did we
so.
move it to Friday?
Yeah. Well, I will be here in 2 weeks, so that's Thanksgiving. Y'all can meet, but I'm not joining.
All right,
so.
yeah, so it must be next week.
What's
So
your
this-
commitment, Nathan? What, yeah, so now next Thursday, I've got a tool that I use that I would like to share. We call it, your talent temperature. And we use this, and this is really helpful when you're doing some personal coaching. And it's really easy, practical, kind of intuitive. I like to take everybody through it, process it, and then give you some application in terms of what you can do after somebody has self-assessed kind of where they're at with their talents. So so that's what we'll be doing. And
Or if you want to, I don't know if you and Gary are doing it together, you guys can talk about it. But if we want to
Yeah.
start an email and then send me kind of like a summary of what we'll do, I'll go into Basecamp and make it and invite everybody and stuff. So
Okay.
just send me like a summary email.
sure.
Great. Well, we look forward to our conversation next week. And for those of you who haven't yet experienced Bert, it's going to be awesome. He's got a lot of experience with Core Clarity and has walked a client through strengths, thousands of people. So really good, broad experience. Looking forward to it. Really appreciate everybody's input today. Got a lot of really valuable information about how everybody's looking at this and how everyone's dealing with it. We got some really good nuggets. Clarity is kindness. There's a whole bunch. I took a lot of notes today, so really appreciate everybody chiming in and really good feedback. And thanks for taking your time to be here with us. And have a good rest of your week, and hopefully see you at some future Mindshift events. And enjoy the rest of your day.
Have a good day, guys. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
See y'all.